Hi everyone, welcome to Raw Inspired Living. My name is Kelly. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. For those that this might be your first time, I'm so grateful to have you here. Today I'm going to talk about the metabolic rhythm that reduces midlife belly fat. So I've been doing a bit of a series about trying to help midlife women understand what's really happening in their body and what is driving that belly fat. So if you've watched my recent videos or any of the recent videos, you'll know that midlife belly fat isn't a calorie problem. It isn't a willpower problem. It's a hormonal pattern, and it's driven by a shift in estrogen, insulin sensitivity, and cortisol that changes how your body responds to the way you eat. And if that's the case, if restriction and harder dieting actually reinforce the pattern, then the obvious question is, what actually works? That's exactly what this video is about today, right? It's not the theory, it is the practical answer. It is what I have researched, it's what I have used on myself, and honestly to get results that I have not had in the 10 years since I started this journey through perimenopause and menopause. So this is the practical answer. What your metabolism actually responds to in midlife, what that looks like in real life, and why it works when so many other approaches have stopped working. Before I get into it, I want to acknowledge something. If you've spent any amount of time trying to manage your weight or your energy in midlife, you've probably been given lots of advice. I know I have been. Some of it was totally exhausting, most of it was conflicting, and most of it was designed for a metabolic environment that is simply different to the one you're in now. What I'm going to share today isn't complicated. In fact, when most women hear it, the first response is, why has nobody told me this before? And that's really what I thought when I did the research and I trialed this on myself. Because it isn't extreme, it doesn't require you to overhaul your life. Like, I've done some extreme things. I've done a 40-day juice-only fast, right? As I say, I've probably done most of the things that you've tried, right? And probably plus some, right? It doesn't ask more of you. It asks something different of you. And that difference is everything. Here is the essential idea that everything else in this video is built on. Your midlife metabolism doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to safety. When your body feels safe, consistently fueled, adequately nourished, not under threat, your cortisol settles. Blood sugar stabilizes, insulin sensitivity gradually improves, and the fat storage pattern that has been driven by chronic stress signaling begins to ease. So the goal is not to force your metabolism into submission. The goal is to create conditions where it feels safe enough to let go of the protective pattern that it's been running. This is fundamentally a different approach to everything most women have been told in this phase of life. And it starts with something that I call metabolic rhythm. So metabolic rhythm is simply this. It is a consistent, structured pattern of eating that keeps the blood sugar stable throughout the day, reduces cortisol spikes that drive the central fat storage, and gives your body the reliable signal that food is available and that it's safe. It's not a diet. It has no forbidden foods, although here on this channel I am all about whole plant-based foods, but you can do this whether you're a meat eater or whether you're plant-based, right? It doesn't require restriction or deprivation, but we will change some things that you're probably currently eating because how you're currently eating got you to this point, right? But what it really requires is structure and consistency. This is not a race. This is about rebuilding your metabolism in a different way, right? And here's why it works so specifically in midlife. After 45, with reduced estrogen and lower insulin sensitivity, your body becomes significantly more reactive to gaps in fuel, right? It just handles it as stress. So long stretches without eating, which the body may have handled without consequence in your 30s, now trigger a cortisol response. Blood sugar drops, cortisol rises to compensate, and the fat storage signal is just reinforced. Metabolic rhythm interrupts that cycle. By eating consistently at regular intervals with the right nutritional structure at each meal, you remove the trigger that has been keeping cortisol elevated. And when cortisol is no longer being consistently activated, the body actually gradually can shift out of protection mode and back into balance. So this is not an overnight change. It's not, I know that, right? But it is a real one. And most women begin to notice shifts within the first week or two of consistent rhythm. No dramatic transformation, just steadiness, predictable hunger, more stable energy, better sleep. Those are the early signs that you want to be looking for that the cortisol pattern is beginning to quieten and shift. So, what does metabolic rhythm actually look like? I want to give you 4 principles, and I want you to think of these not as rules, right, but as signals. It's sort of a methodology for the way you roll through your day, right? Each one is sending your body a specific message, and that message repeated consistently is what creates the actual shift. So principle 1, eat regularly every 3 to 4 hours. I know that sounds hard, especially if you've been fasting or doing all these different things, but that is the key thing that made the most difference to me, right? So long gaps between meals are one of the most common cortisol trigger patterns in midlife. Eating at consistent intervals, not actually waiting until you're starving or you're hungry even, and not skipping meals when you're busy, that creates metabolic safety. Your body learns that fuel, it's got a supply that it can trust, right? And therefore doesn't need to store protectively. That's what we're after. The exact timing matters sort of less than the consistency. So what you're building is a rhythm that your body can anticipate. But in the beginning, do not go longer than 4 hours, right? Even if you're not hungry, because cortisol suppresses your actual hunger signals. So just eat within that 4-hour window and don't go longer. Principle 2, anchor every meal with protein. Now, this is not like a forever thing, but it's very important when you're trying to stabilize your metabolism and stop this pattern. So protein is the single most important nutritional shift for midlife metabolic health. It preserves and builds muscle that drive insulin sensitivity. It slows the absorption of carbohydrates, preventing these blood sugar spikes that trigger the cortisol, and it stabilizes hunger hormones so that reactive eating, like the kind driven by energy crashes, which we've all experienced, become much less frequent. So for midlife women, and particularly plant-based women, protein intake is consistently lower than the body needs in this phase of life if you are dealing with these types of cycles, right? So getting intentional about protein at every single meal, not just dinner, is foundational to these principles. Right, so how much protein, which sources work best, and how to structure meals around protein is something I go into in much more depth in the Rawly Inspired membership, because the specifics around that, are worth getting right. So principle 3, structure your carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are not the enemy in midlife. We need carbohydrates. The brain needs carbohydrates. The body needs carbohydrates, but it's unstructured carbohydrates when they're eaten alone in large portions or in liquid form without protein support, which was part of one of the things that I struggle with because I loved a huge fruit smoothie, right? It's not to say that I'll never have one again, but in this phase where I'm rebuilding my metabolism, it's not supportive, right? So that's where the issue is, it's not supportive. So when carbohydrates are paired with adequate protein and eaten in moderate measured portions, they become stable fuel rather than a blood sugar spike waiting to happen. This is why those heavy fruit smoothies that felt great at 35 really might not be serving you now. It's not the fruit. Fruit's great. I love fruit. It's basically the structure around it. That's the challenge when you're facing, as I said, this midlife metabolism. And some of the challenges that come with it. So principle 4 is be intentional with fats. Healthy fats are an important part of midlife nutrition. I'm not saying don't have them, but they are one of the most commonly overlooked variables where metabolism isn't responding the way it should. In midlife, excess fat can slow down glucose clearance, right? Meaning blood sugar takes longer to settle after meals, which keeps the insulin and cortisol cycle running longer than it needs to. So small intentional amounts of healthy fat at each meal keep things satisfying without creating a real, pressure on that system, right? Doesn't mean avoiding fat, that's not what I'm saying. It means being deliberate about it, a measured amount rather than an unmeasured pour, right? and an intentional addition and not stacking, right? So for example, you wouldn't have avocado, a seed-based dressing, cook your tofu in olive oil, like that's fat stacking. We're not doing that, right? You're doing one of those three things, right? So that's the way you need to think about fat. So for most women, this is a surprisingly simple shift. But in a midlife metabolic context, the difference between measured and unmeasured fats can have a very meaningful impact on how stable blood sugar remains across the day and how responsive the whole system becomes over time. So when I really looked at my diet after I learnt these principles, I realised that although I was eating very good fats, I was just eating way too much of them for my body, and that was part of why my body was struggling, with belly fat and the insulin resistance and all of those things. These 4 principles are the foundation of what I call metabolic stabilization, and they are the starting point for everything we do inside the Rawley Inspired membership. We go significantly deeper in the membership, all of the specifics around all of those principles, right? Targets for midlife women, exactly how to structure each fuel window and how to adapt this approach, whether you're plant-based or meat-based, what to expect in the first few weeks, how to progress from stabilization to the next phases of metabolic health. I'm on this journey with you. I'm doing this with you, right? So the full pathway, the support, the community, doing this with other women that are in exactly the same position as you is in the membership, and you get guidance at each of those stages. But honestly, you don't have to wait for the membership. You don't have to join the membership, right? I've put together a little free guide, right, about understanding your midlife metabolism, and it includes a self-assessment to help you identify where your metabolism is currently sitting. And there's a little simple 3-day meal structure built around these exact principles, right? So that you can begin experiencing what consistent metabolic rhythm actually does feel like in your body. So you'll find the link in the description below. So if this series of videos that I've done has given you a clearer picture of what's been happening in your body, and I hope that it has, and what your body actually needs, I am so genuinely grateful, because discovering this information and being able to put it in a context that my brain understood really did change my life. I've been on this journey for 10 years, and knowing what I know now, I wish that I'd discovered this information quite a while ago. But the clarity that you have now is the first step. And when you're ready to take the next one, that support is here on this channel for you. So I hope that this video has helped you in some way, and I look forward to seeing you again in Raw Inspired Living.